Hello, everyone. This is Progressive HR Live. Kristin and I are trying something a little bit different today. We are going to do a new segment of Progressive HR Live, which I call Progressive HR Live and Nano. So everyone is really into nano content right now. So when you do lives, I mean, you can't do a 5-minute live. You can't do a 3-minute live. So as nano as we're going to get today is half an hour over your lunch break. So we have 3 segments today. Well, first of all, you know what? What am I doing? I'm getting right into the content. I'm like, I got to get it done. I'm going to introduce my co-host today, Kristin Strunk. She's the HR director. Well, she's so many things at Harley Davidson. So she's director of talent, employee experience, and compensation. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yep. They keep just tacking on things.
More and more. Yeah.
More. She's a one-woman machine. How are you doing today, Kristin? Where are you streaming from?
I'm doing great. I am streaming from a cold and brisk Milwaukee, Wisconsin today. I think we are at 6 degrees in the sunshine. So we are definitely feeling the January air.
Awesome. I know. We have a wind chill advisory tomorrow for schools. Schools may be canceled tomorrow. Wind chill advisory on minus 36 degrees. Craziness.
Oh my.
Yeah. So now we'll get into what I wanted to say before is that we'll have talking about 3 segments today. So that is LinkedIn's Jobs on the Rise, video resumes, the next cover letter or not, and the reinvention of company culture. So while we're talking about these things, if you have any questions or comments, please add them to the comment section and we will respond live. So let's get started. I'm just going to take a quick peek and see who is watching today. Well, that's interesting. All these new processes with LinkedIn. If you have any questions or comments, please add them. There we go. So again, all these new processes with LinkedIn Live. It's really interesting how LinkedIn is setting live hosts up for what they consider to be success, but I'm not really sure algorithm is taking notice. So this today is our nano experiment. All right, so we have 5 people watching. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Let us know in the comments where you're joining from and if you have any questions or comments for Kristin and I as we start our discussion. So, Kristin, let's talk about LinkedIn Jobs on the Rise. Yeah, so I found this really interesting is that LinkedIn put together a report of 25 of the jobs that are like the hottest jobs right now in 2022. And this data is aggregated over 5 years. So they've been seeing this coming over 5 years. And there's 3 HR roles within LinkedIn Jobs on the Rise. So that is one of the top ones, number 2, diversity and inclusion manager. And then number 12, talent acquisition specialist. And then number 5, CHRO. Oh, excuse me, not number 5, number 25, CHRO. So what do you think about this? What do you think about LinkedIn Jobs on the Rise?
Well, I think the list is a really interesting list, and it was a great combination of technology and one of the other topics we're going to be talking about today, culture, right? So when we think about things like the diversity and inclusion manager or diversity, equity, and inclusion or belonging, you really start to see those roles in higher level positions in the organization, helping to set strategy and pull that through the organization. And I don't know that we should be surprised by that based on some of the other things that have been happening over the past 2 years. And then if we shift to the talent acquisition specialist, this right now, one of the hardest jobs to recruit for is other recruiters at the moment. This is really an opportunity for recruiters to shine and talent acquisition specialists to shine in the work that they do. If we look at what people are calling the Great Resignation, and we think about the fact that the talent acquisition specialist is usually that first person who can talk about a company's culture, their remote work practices and processes, what they bring to a potential candidate from a growth and opportunity and a life work balance perspective, I think that you start to see why that might have made this list. And the CHRO, just based on all of these pieces coming together, all of the technology pieces, managing through the pandemic into this new way of working, it doesn't surprise me at all that that also made the list.
Yeah, that's a great summary of all of that. I'm honestly surprised that talent acquisition specialist was number 12. I thought that would maybe be a little bit higher up there. To kind of get off the HR train for a minute, like vaccine specialist was number 1. So that was no surprise. And it was no surprise number 2 was diversity inclusion manager.
Right.
Just thinking talent acquisition manager was a little higher. And then I'm really glad that CHRO made it in there at number 25. What I also found really, really interesting was the jobs that kind of were the stepping stone to these jobs. Mm-hmm. And LinkedIn stated that there was 3 jobs that were kind of like the top jobs for stepping stones for talent, for diversity and inclusion manager, program manager, recruiter, and project manager. And I found that really interesting. Like, why is there not a diversity and inclusion, assistant, or why is there not like another D&I role under that? Why are people going from program manager, recruiter, especially, I can understand that, and project manager into these D&I roles? What is your take on that?
So when I think about that, a program manager or a project manager is a role in an organization that really is, I wouldn't say it's the glue that holds things together, but it is the most likely to be communicating across diverse stakeholders in a company. And so if you think about a program manager or a project manager, they're potentially working with marketing, they're potentially working with the digital office, they're potentially working with HR, they are working with executives to gain approval. And so when you think about the skill set that would be needed in order to help someone elevate diversity, equity, and inclusion conversations across all of those stakeholders, I think that for me really was what stood out when I thought about that particular skill set. So I think it makes a lot of sense. I think that you couldn't necessarily take someone from an engineering organization in a project management perspective and put them in the DE&I roles or something like that without either some passion or some history or some past experience in that space. But those are the skill sets that are necessary to keep DE&I front and center in a lot of conversations across a diverse group of stakeholders.
Yeah. Wow. 100%, Kristin, 100%. And you saw that Jesus agreed with us there. Yeah.
It looked like it.
Yeah.
I'm guessing he has a role that might be similar.
And we had some engagement, some likes, and some celebrations there too, as well, from what you said. Right. So last thing I wanted to cover on the jobs on the rise and going to the CHRO position, the roles that people transitioned from were chief operating officer, talent acquisition manager, and organizational development manager. So any thoughts on that? There wasn't, one of the top jobs wasn't VP of HR or HR director. So why is that? What are you missing? What's the gap?
Well, I think when we think about these roles in especially larger organizations where you might have that general HR experience, again, might not necessarily have the experience of operating from a center of excellence or a service center type mentality. I think the talent acquisition piece is very interesting in this space because while they have to be very tightly linked to the general business strategy and be able to understand a lot of different areas across the business at the same time. Whereas some particular HR segments might be really in a specific area. And so when you think about talent acquisition, they're potentially working, again, across the organization, right? So they're not necessarily working all the way vertically in a specific expertise, but it's that skill set of working across and throughout an organization at different levels.
Thanks for that, Kristin. I appreciate your opinion. That's why I have you on the live today. So, okay, let's move into our next segment. Oh, that's not it. This one is it. Here, video resumes, the next cover letter. So BBC News just today reported that what is it that 61% of job seekers thought a recorded video could be the next iteration of a traditional cover letter, and that video resumes were on the rise. Now, I kind of feel like video resumes have been on the rise for a while, and then they came in, and then they went out, and they came back in. I mean, and are we at a sticking point now? Everybody knows we need to disrupt the resume. And BBC's talking about disrupting the cover letter, which I don't think we should have anymore. Anyway, I pratter on. You tell me what you think.
So I think this is really interesting because it really does reflect and is probably a better reflection of how most of us are interacting today versus maybe what we have done in the past, right? So when you think about the amount of time that you and I spend on video, this is a really great representation then of how I can present myself, how I can communicate, how I can display emotion or thoughtfulness. So I think that there's a spot for this. And I am also very much of the in the agreement of cover letters they're just not worth the time and the energy. And it might even be easier for you to do a 2-minute video of yourself speaking specifically to a job opening. So I'm anxious to see where this goes. I think that it will be really interesting to see how talent acquisition software keeps up with this particular trend. Right now, you can upload a PDF or a JPEG or a Word document. So I think that was something that's going to have to be shared and changed as we go, right?
Yeah. And I was thinking this kind of like leads into like agile hiring and just-in-time communications. Oh, this is where my mind went, is that I had read the other day of that, candidates are really flipping the role on recruiters, in that when a recruiter is responding or recruiting is reaching out to them, the candidate is coming back and saying, okay, here, fill this form out. Here, apply to talk to me. And it's really a role reversal. I mean, candidates have the power right now, and they're asking recruiters, and we're not jumping. Candidates aren't jumping at the conversation with a recruiter. They're saying, hey, fill this application, then I'll decide if I want to talk to you. I'm at like 100% on that. What do you think?
I think that's a great way for candidates to view themselves right now and going forward. I don't think that there is any reason that talent acquisition parts of organizations should be the ones who are really running the show when you really think about it. I think there are 100 different ways to communicate. And I think that by showing that respect to a candidate or having those really honest conversations with a potential candidate, you're really demonstrating that you're valuing their time, and it sets them up for potentially a good move into the organization. So I say, go for it. Get creative with what you want, and really start to ask those questions up front if you're out there job hunting.
I like that. Let's see, as we checking to see if we have any comments from anybody coming in or anything. So audience, if you have any questions or comments for Kristin, don't be shy. Please ask us. Let us know what you're thinking. We greatly appreciate all the engagement and interaction that you're giving us right now. So we're going to jump into the last segment here, the reinvention of company culture. So a lot of people are talking about reinvention right now. Reimagining the people function, reinvention of new work ways. And so the back to LinkedIn, released its global trends report for 2022. And in the global trends report, they said that the reinvention of company culture is a trend in well-being. and that it stated there was an importance for training managers on empathy.
Mhm.
And that stuck out to me because I'd also just seen your post this morning. And you said, and so I want to know from you, what does training managers to be empathetic mean to you in the context of your post today, which was the challenge of performing while transforming has become the leadership test of our time.
Well, I guess if I knew the answer to that, I wouldn't have asked my entire network what they do. So here's what I do think. I think that there will not be a time in the future where we are not transforming into something, right? So we are going to continue to go through these changes, to whether it is to society, whether it is to our social contracts with work, whether it is to the creator economy or any other part of that potential shift from what we considered to be the old ways of working. I have a job, the company provides me with certain things, I do my job, I go home. That is pretty much, blown up for a lot of people at the moment, and will continue to be that way going into the future. And so that transformation, whether you're talking about company culture, whether you're talking about new technology, when you think about this would have been 10 years ago, we would have been talking about a change management competency, right? We would have been talking about the formal process of, creating the burning platform and finding your executive champion and sponsor and creating your elevator speech. Like, we would have gone through that process. And a lot of the tenets are the same right now in terms of transformation, but we as leaders have to do it while we're working, right? So you're on a unicycle, you are juggling balls of fire, and you are in a circle of dancing bears, right? So you are in this circus of changes and new things, and you're learning with your team. There's no cascading of those messages or those changes. We are going straight to everybody at the same time. And so leaders really do need to be able to transform as they lead their team and help support their team through transformation as well. And I think that's where this really becomes complicated, and it really takes a lot more energy maybe than those typical change management processes we would have used in the past.
That's really interesting. And even though I was a HR leader, as we were just discussing before this live, 6 some years ago, and I've kind of lost I wouldn't say I lost my interest in leadership information. But I lost a little bit of it, and it's coming back now because, we're not just leaders in corporate, HR is leading everything right now. And it's interesting how, whether or not we're moving from a role of, static administration policy, very black and white, or maybe a little bit of gray here, to this more of like this empathetic role, people first. And so I'm kind of brought myself back now to listening and reading about leadership, because it has 100% to do with HR right now. So.
And I think the other really interesting thing that's happening is this idea of the personalized experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where this conversation around empathy, especially as a leader, if not as a coworker, comes out. Because when we start to think about this, if I use myself as an example and the team that I manage, when the pandemic hit, we were all in very different situations. So 2 years ago, we had a few folks with young children. We had a few folks with no children. They were all managing different things. They were all reacting differently to the situation. And they each required an individualized approach, whether I was helping them set priorities or clarifying expectations or removing some of their workload. They all required something that was individualized. And that required me as a leader to listen, to understand, to ask questions, And that's the definition of empathy. And so I really believe that the individual employee experience and the individual team member experience are what should be really driving that. And that's how you get the link to not only empathy, but well-being. And you really start those conversations of what do you need to be in your best mindset to produce your best work. And so each person is going to need something different. And it requires leaders and organizations to be flexible, to be open-minded, and you're right, above all, to be empathetic.
So what you're just saying there really sparked a thought in my mind, is that, does that also lead us to redefining what we would consider as a high-performing employee? So if we're individualizing everything with our employees, are we also individualizing this idea of who is high performing? It's not necessarily, and I'm not going to answer my own question here, but it's not necessarily the person that is always putting out output.
Right.
How is that redefining high performing employees?
So I think if I step back, because that's an excellent question, if I step back and I think about how it really impacts our definition of a high performing employee, and I really reflect on a high performing employee having high levels of self-awareness, not only in the workplace, but outside of the workplace. What do I need in order to reassess how I'm doing, to rejuvenate? I think that that's something that's very important. And as we consider that high performance, we have to ask, high performance in service to what? And when we think about, is it high performance in service to the organization's goal and strategy and community involvement relationship? Is it high performance in I want to move up into a different position, because that's something that we encourage people to move ahead with. So as an employee, you also have to get very clear on what it is you are trying to get out of the work experience and what you are going to take away. And so it's a double-sided conversation, because as an employee, you can no longer walk into an organization, sit down and say, develop me. I want to be the next CHRO. I'm going to sit here until you figure out my career path and who I need to talk to and the jobs I need to have. No, that doesn't happen anymore either. So you have to figure out high performance in service to what? And I think that's probably a really basic question that we need to make sure we're having conversations about.
And that's an excellent question as well. Rachel. Hi, Rachel. She says, I really like Kristin's point of view on this, the connection between empathy and well-being in the workplace culture. Yeah, agree, 100%. Thanks, Rachel. Good to see you as well. Rachel and I haven't seen each other in person for months.
Welcome, Rachel. Well, Corinne, I think I'd love to ask you a question about this idea of company culture and empathy. And I'd like for you to pull in the technology piece. I'd like for you to pull in, how do these technology tools that we now have that are evolving probably faster than we've ever seen, are going into areas that we have never seen. How do they support this concept of empathy and company culture in those areas that you're prevalent in?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And I haven't thought of the empathy piece before. So you are kind of like, okay, now I have to reflect on that. I would say, for me, this is my opinion coming from my perspective and my knowledge, is that a lot of the technology that's coming out now is helping us feel more empowered and more confident in like my line of work, creation. We're receiving what I would say fans. So fans of our work, whether that being, you're a corporate HR director and you're creating content through an LXP, or, doing async video. So it's creating this feeling within us of like our confidence and our empowerment. And then that's vibrating out, and we're giving that back. And we're understanding that not only are we creators, or we have something very special as unique, resourceful humans, that other people have that as well. And that creates a bond and that creates empathy with people. So that's my point of view. So
no, I think that's really, really great to understand, because empathy doesn't just happen between leaders and their teams, right? It really is, to your point, about where do you create those bonds? Where do you create those relationships? And I think the creator economy is really a great opportunity to build those relationships, to build those bonds, and have empathy, and then potentially be creating content in a vein that maybe no one else is working in or working with.
To add on to that is, my perspective always been is like, we're all incredibly unique and we all have something very special to share. And no one person is like the other out of, what is it, like 7.9 billion people in the world today. We're all unique, and viewing someone is not just a cog in the wheel, or just another peer. Viewing someone you're working with, or the team you're working with, as each individual unique person and with special attributes, is very important. And I agree with you. The creator economy is boosting that wonderfully. That's why I'm such a fan of the creator economy. So everyone, we are coming to the bottom of the half hour, and we've had a few conversation here from Rachel. Rachel says hello. But if you have any questions or comments, the last few minutes we have here, let us know. We can probably take one more question. And if we don't have any questions, then we'll just end early, because everyone loves to end early and take a coffee break. So, Kristin, it looks like we don't have any more comments coming in. So let's wrap up and say thank you, everybody, to joining us for the first. Oh, we have a comment. Rachel's scooting that comment in the last moment there. The creator economy rocks. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I keep forgetting there's always that 30-second lag between things. So we're ending now. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for the first installment of Progressive HR Live Nano Moments. And thank you, Kristin, for being my guest today. Greatly appreciate you and your insight and your point of view.
Thank you so much. It was great to talk with you.
All right, everybody, we're ending the live broadcast now. Have a fabulous Tuesday.